Welcome to Jollof and Fiction, home of African literature and stories, the kind that warm your heart like a fresh pot of jollof. Today, you're tuning into a recorded session of our online book discussion, so sit back, relax, and join the conversation.
Yes, Abdul is the host. Somebody shout hallelujah. So, I would like to begin the story by asking, you can indicate in the chat, you don't have to raise your hand to speak, or just give me some reactions. If you, after reading the story, you went to read up more on this event of the fall of the Benin Kingdom or the looting of the Benin Kingdom passport. If you did, please let me see reactions so you can just add in the chat that you did. I see one hand up. That is encouraging. All right, so let's get it started. So my first question is going to be one taken directly from the story itself. And the question is asking, what even is freedom? I have my own ideas, but I would like to hear the ideas or how you guys are going to define freedom, because I think it's going to be important for the discussion we're going to have today. So if you have any idea what freedom means, or if you want to define freedom in your way or in a way that you think works for you, you can please raise your hand and let me know.
Thank you, Abdul. It's me, Barnabas. I'm logged in with the Jollof account, like I've mentioned. So I like to say that this is what I believe, the whole concept of freedom is somewhat of an illusion. Do you get? Because that's my own idea, because people base the idea that we have some kind of freedom because man is a free moral agent, like we decide. But if you probe further, you realize even the choices we make is still being influenced by external factors. So in the end, can we really say that we are free to make the choices we make? Because a lot of times we make our choices based on factors. So I know there's a lot more to say about this, but for me, I feel the idea of freedom is an illusion. We make ourselves believe we have options. Do you understand? When in reality, that the options we have are those presented to us by external factors most at times. So that's my thoughts.
All right, thank you very much. Lambent, please go ahead.
Thank you. Please, am I being heard audibly? Sometimes people say my earpiece is so low.
I can hear you clearly.
Okay. I think freedom.
I can hear you clearly.
I think freedom could be on a spectrum. I think freedom could be different things at different times. Maybe when you are in primary school, freedom would just be to graduate and get the hell out of there. For someone who is barely surviving and having 2 square meals or doing 001, freedom would be the ability to finally be able to purchase something without looking at the price tag, finally be able to eat 3 full square meals. For someone who is behind bars, the closest they can think to freedom is to get out of that prison. Maybe for someone who has been hemmed in all their lives by their parents or their guardian, freedom would be to just go to the university and finally be free to make their own decision, free to even think. So I think probably there is no one definition of freedom, one size fits all. Just part-time, what is freedom to you at that time, and then working towards it. But maybe the closest to generalizing freedom would be ability to make choices and stand by them, in my own opinion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Freedom, you say is subjective, and Barnabas says I can't remember clearly right now. It said that there are 2 types of freedom, which is freedom to do something and freedom from something. So working with your frameworks, right? Freedom from hunger, freedom to move across a nation, freedom to go from a place to a place, freedom to go to a place, freedom from oppression, freedom from so on. So it is the way I usually use to just decide the kind of freedom I am talking about in the moment. So I want to start this conversation by mentioning something very funny that I found out when I was researching about Benin Kingdom and their bronze art. So, and the supposed to be thrown, burnt the palace, and destroyed numerous bronze works alongside other artworks stored in the palace. And I found it interesting because in the story, the slave, or not the slave, the main character was witnessing the entire a bunch of civilians were looking at the burning of their kingdom's palace, and they were thinking this has never happened before, and what kind of sacrifice would they need to make it correct? And meanwhile, it had happened before in the very kingdom, and at the same time too, the fire destroyed a lot of bronze artworks. So that was the first serious calamity that was struck. So yes, the question I want to ask now is, what do you guys think about the artworks themselves being heralded, being so popular, while the artisans, right, who made these bronze artworks themselves are basically not in the story at all? So if you look up anything about it, it's generally just about, the bronze works were carted away, but nothing is ever mentioned about the people that actually made the bronze works. And their names are out there, just it's never popular. So I'm talking about art history and the erasure of the artist himself or themselves. If anyone has anything to say about it, please let me know. Please talk. You can go ahead.
Hi, Abdul. So I would say that so far our history is oral, and documentation usually happens by passing down history. And since we had colonization, that oral history was eroded in part. And if we didn't have this artwork currently away, we might not even know, have access to the knowledge that they existed because of the way that we pass down historical facts. So I am sure that at a certain point in time through history, that these people, these artisans, were being appreciated as oral history is being passed down. So there's no documentation. It's not like the Western world where they write their history down for us to remember the names of these people. I mean, we can't even remember so much as of what happened during the Biafra War, not talk of a century ago. So I think that's one of the issues that we have, that I don't think it's a lack of appreciation for the artist, but more a lack of historical facts being lost through time. So that's what I feel has happened so far.
Right, thank you. Very interesting.
So it was a thing of they intentionally did not chase fame. They made it because they had that mindset that they were making something much bigger than them. It's almost like how you would have, I don't want to be the person who really brings things to church, but a priest celebrating Mass, for example. You may remember Mass, or you may not remember the priest's name, because to him it's something much larger than him. It's a lot larger than the priest itself or himself. It's more about the art, more about the representation. So that's my own feeling.
Okay, thank you. Chisara, before you speak, I want to point out a few things. So, Promise mentioned the fickleness of oral history, and Navas mentioned the comparison to Western. He compared it to how let me call it Westerners or foreign people do it, not Africans, sure. And Jennifer mentioned how it is basically because the artists were not regarding themselves as the points, or their art was larger than them. So So, first of all, Promise would find it interesting, and I think Nabas also, that the artworks themselves, the sculptures, were a way of recording history. As in, they would, whenever an event happens, right, they are going to commemorate the event by making a sculpture or a plaque about it. I'm not so sure which one, but they use it as a form of recording history. Then, secondly, as for the artisans themselves, there was a guild, right? The guild was also mentioned in the story, and the main character's love interest was part of the guild. They were often titled, so they were esteemed by the king in society, even though maybe the citizens did not get to really see those artworks. Because like I also mentioned, even one is burns down the palace. So things happen. And lastly, I wanted to mention, you know what, children, please speak now. Let me, if I forget about it.
Okay, hi. I hope you guys can hear me. I'm in a little bit, I'm in a noisy place. So
Yes, I can hear you.
what I wanted to say was that it's somehow related to what you just mentioned about the king, regarding these people, or maybe it was just the common people who did not. But then I wanted to say that somehow it could be that these things were documented, because I really do believe that Africans back then were not stupid, and we had a way of keeping information aside from oral passing of information, just like Promise mentioned. I feel like there's a way they pass down these informations. And sometimes when you read books, you read the way Africans write, or the way some historical figures were documented. They always mention, like, if there's something peculiar about you, they'll say that this person is for example, a great artist and was the son of so and so, and the son of so and so. Like, I think we do that a lot in Africa. So I feel like for these artisans not to be recognized, maybe it was part of what was destroyed. Because I mean, what is the best way of destroying? The best way to make something lost entirely is by even taking away the value of the person who made it. Like, that is how I feel though. So I feel like maybe their names just got lost with the white man's invasion, not that in Africa they were not recognized. So invading, taking away the artifacts and everything just automatically was a way their names were lost, and it's more like they were not recognized anymore. So I really do feel like they were probably documented, but it's just that from the invasion, they kind of like went and they were no more remembered or recognized because nobody talks about them anymore. Yeah.
All right, thank you guys for sharing. And yes, that's why I mentioned. But like, I'm glad you also thought the same way before I even talk about how they used their artworks to record history. Though, I mean, it's not going to be as efficient as writing like 10-page documents about it. But those artworks even are straight instrumental even till today. I read about a dilemma or a problem they could not solve about the specific arrangements of certain ritual items. But some of the artworks that were not stolen away, maybe the chiefs had hidden them or even also stolen them for their own personal property, was instrumental in solving that particular problem. So they could just say, oh, that's how they did it back then, so we'll just do it the same way. So I wanted to also go back to the story because I don't want to make it intellectual. And after now, I would call some names. Please, if your hands are up, can you please raise it, drop it? Interesting words. I'm just reading now. At the onset of the invasion, on the first day, the Oba fled into the bush until 5th August 1897, when the Oba, tired of his unaccustomed roaming and bush life, returned back to Benin Kingdom and surrendered himself to the British invaders. He was pride and exile to Calabar. The Oba's palace was burned after crashing away with about 3,000 treasures of bronze and ivory. Indigenous people who resisted British attack were executed, and every house and building was burnt. So, in light of this passage I just read, if you guys heard it, what do you guys think about the story? And now I'm just open to thought about the story in general. What did you feel? Because The love was loving. I enjoyed it, but I don't know. If I'm going to keep talking, I'm very likely to just keep talking about intellectual consequences of everything. So, Brown, go first. Brown, if you can hear me, please signify with your emojis. Hello? Brown? Okay, I don't think you can hear me. Umesoma, can you please tell us a bit about the story itself? Anything you want to discuss about the story? Oh, the question. Okay, Brown, hi. The question is, what do you feel about the story? What did it make you feel? What's anything you want to say about it? That's the question. If you can hear me now.
Okay, all right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Okay, so what did I feel about the question? First of all, I didn't really care about the mushy story, the mushy lovey stuff between the girl and her lover. I didn't really care about that. What came to me, what I was really thinking about is the how do I put this? The mirror between the white man and the Benin Kingdom. Where the white man comes in, he colonizes and essentially destroys an entire culture. And the Benin Kingdom, who are the victims right now, are essentially guilty of doing the exact same thing to the girl's kingdom. If you remember, the girl used to be a princess, then she became a slave to the Benin Kingdom. And so it just bore a question in me, like, all these hate that white and Europeans get for their obvious crimes of humanity during their colonial era, are they really that guilty per se, or are they just guilty of being human at that particular time? Because if the Benin Kingdom had the same technology and the same access to everything that the white man had, wouldn't they essentially do the same thing? Couldn't we switch racism for tribalism, and you find Benin people doing the exact same thing as the white people did? So those were the things that came to my own mind when I was reading the story. I didn't really care about the love and all that. I don't care about such things. Anyway.
You don't care about such things, Mr. Man. You cannot be in Jollof fan fiction and not care about love. You will not rest. So, sorry guys, I had to mute myself for a moment. So yes, I do agree with you. Like, I also thought about the same thing, which is, I'm even glad you brought it up, because I was going to lead to it, but you are speeding things up for me, which is nice. So, yes. Africa has a slaving history. That is a fact we are going to have to swallow. We are going to have to deal with it also. We did keep slaves, because slaves are primarily war. After you fight a war and you win, you get to keep their people as slaves, and then you can use those slaves to make money for economic purposes, as in, you need slaves to farm, you need slaves to tend to your palaces, to clean the bronze the bronze artworks we are talking about. So, to do housekeeping, and to also use as political bargaining chips, like women are often used for. So, yes, I'm sorry, hold on, guys. So, yes, I want people to talk about what they think is the difference between that sort of slavery, the kind of slavery that existed in Africa. The hands are already up. Okay. That kind of slavery and the slavery they talk about that the Europeans committed in Africa. So, I will be looking at the list now.
Hi, guys.
Hi, babe.
I think that the major difference is how recent this colonization was. Like, it's recent enough for us to remember it, and maybe the fact that after the fact that it's recent enough for us to remember it, so there's like, it's, give me a moment. Sorry guys, I had someone asking me something. So it's recent for us to remember that, oh, this just happened recently, because conquering has always happened over history. Humanity likes to conquer others who are perceived as weaker than them. And slavery has always existed from time immemorial, and slaves are conquered people, So when we talk about slavery of the blacks, by the Europeans, you can also still talk about different time periods where there's been slavery and the conquering of a certain people. So I don't think there is any difference other than the fact that this is just recent and we can remember this. And the generation who went through slavery, they haven't, this was like 1800s. So it's not been so far off that we forget. And over time, people would call for, why do I keep saying over time, people will be like, okay, let's move on from this. And there will be something else that would happen. It's just like there is technology. The world is united as one. So when something happens here, we can all hear about the things that are happening. And we can all put in our different two-piece and thoughts, unlike those times where one thing happening in one side was just restricted to that area or that zone. I mean, there's slavery going on right now of women in places like Afghanistan. I call it slavery anyway. So yes, the world is just filled with humans, and humans are fucked up. Thank you.
I thank you for sharing. And interesting line of thoughts. I will get to it later. So, Light, please, you can speak now. If you can hear me, let me know by your emojis, or just start speaking immediately. Light of Jollof.
I'm here. I can hear you. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Hi. Okay, sorry. I think my network was misbehaving. I couldn't hear anybody for a minute. Okay, so your question about the difference between slavery that was practiced over here in Africa versus slavery that was practiced in the West. I think that slavery is slavery. However, what was practiced in the West is referred to as chattel slavery. And chattel slavery is where it's a form of slavery, and I'm using air quotes when I say that, where they treated people as subhuman. So subhuman, I'm talking about human beings were equivalent or even less than animals, like farm animals and whatnot. There are stories, there are articles and whatnot about people being treated less than animals would have been treated, because the people in this group were taken from like very far places, and they were alienated from their families, lives. They became new people. Their children belonged to their slave masters. It was just like, it reduced their status to almost inanimate property. Care is not taken. Now, across Africa, there were also different kinds of slavery. And I don't know if we're talking about this book in particular, but in Africa, sometimes slave trade could be to people, so you can give yourself out if you're owing a debt, maybe so until you complete the payment of the debt, then you can go back. There was that kind of slavery. There was also slavery where the slaves could retain the right to get married, stuff like that. So slavery in Africa generally, or for the most part, and slavery abroad were quite different. So people could get slaves as spoils of war. They could get slaves from maybe if they catch a criminal or somebody who has done very badly, as a penalty instead of death, it could also be losing your rights to live as you would have, or in quotes, free, right? So these are some of the examples. I don't know if this answers anything. So I think that slavery in Africa was a lot different from slavery outside Africa, whether you're talking about trans-Saharan or transatlantic slave trade. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the very interesting explanation. Right, I largely agree with you, and in some parts. The questions I have next, I'm going to ask next, are going to be sort of related to what you just said about transatlantic and trans-Saharan slavery. So, Chizaram, please let us hear what you think about it.
All right, thank you, guys. Thank you. So, what I want to say is, sorry, my answer might be, I hope it doesn't drift, but what I want to say is that I don't think we can compare this slavery. I don't think it's the same. I say that because whatever happened between Africa, when I got to that part when Ini was speaking and I remembered, yes, I did think about this, it's almost the same thing. One would say it's almost the same thing that the white men did, that the Benin Kingdom were doing to other people. But I think maybe the reason why I wouldn't say it's the same thing is because they were doing it within a particular terrain. Now, we never heard that people from the Benin Kingdom went to the west to go and conquer lands. But this happened. They left their lands, they came here. They did not just vandalize the land, like they killed people, they sold slaves, they did a lot of things, and so many Africans are living over there till this day. And we can all agree that even till this day, Africans are not really accepted as part of their society, even though we try to say that, oh, there's no more racism, oh, this is happening. But whenever you look at an African living over there, you know that this person obviously is not from here. But when the whole slavery thing ended here in Africa, nobody really cares where you're from. I know that there is tribalism, but nobody really still considers anybody as slaves. There are places where these things still seep in. Like, there are times when my mom used to tell me stories of parts of our village where they consider as slaves. But, I'm just saying, everybody's African, everybody's black, everybody's from Enugu State, and that and that and that. So it's very different from what the white people did. Their own has a very long-lasting impact. Until today, we can still see that they are not even done. To them, Africa is still a place where they come to loot, they come to steal, and they are still not apologetic about it. So I think whatever happened with the African kind of slavery was within Africa, within a community. But outside there, it's much more worse because still today, it's still prevalent. So that's my thoughts, though.
All right, thank you. It has an interesting perspective. Oh, I'm seeing comments in the chats. They didn't go to the West yet. Okay. So the next person, please, that would be... I've skipped Barnabas for a while. So Barnabas, if you have something new to add to this conversation, please.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say that the part where I read about slavery in the story, I felt we were quite hypocritical because I know we judge the Westerners a lot for slavery, but reading this, and I remember Tomorrow Died Yesterday, where it was mentioned in Asiama, slavery had always been a thing even before the Westerners came. Do you understand? People gave themselves when they could not pay a debt or something like that. I think that's why it was easier for the Westerners to have their way, because it was already in existence. The kings now realized, oh, since we could do this before without any form of compensation, let's do it now and get things from them. So they would trade their own for gunpowder, for mirror, for lame things at the time, but it was valuable to them then. Now, this might be a weak comparison, but then it just made me realize that the slavery thing, so like it's more like the banal nature of humans, because even today we have modern day slavery. Like I read some stuff about some ladies, how they treat their maid, and I'm like, you are practically, this is slavery, honestly speaking. I think I was having a discussion with Olivia one time, the way some ladies treat their maids, and you're like, there's nothing you tell me, this is slavery, modern day slavery. Do you understand? So it has always been, as much as in a way it has there's some kind of civilization that's set in, but those elements you still see it in play even till today. So, like I said, it was just hypocritical when I read about it. Like, oh, so we were even doing this before the Westerners came. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I shall, Lambent.
I said time is fast spent, so I'm just going to keep it very brief. I think I agree with Nabas. I think that the need to trump over other humans was just inherently present in humans in general. I think if Africans got the weaponry, the machines, the warships and jets first, they would have first of all wiped themselves out. When they are done wiping themselves out, then proceed to other lands. Because if you think about the fact that this slavery, it was Africans themselves that were selling their brothers and sisters, then you find that I don't think we are more righteous. Maybe slightly more humane in the treatment of slaves, maybe slightly more humane, because maybe the white man could see the black and he's seen a black man is seeing a slave and he's seen an unlucky, unfortunate bastard. Like him, but unlucky, unfortunate, and therefore inferior. But the white man could be looking at a black and he doesn't see him like him, he doesn't see him as human self. So I think that's just a slight alteration in perspective is the only difference. Otherwise, the cruelty, the bedrock, everything is the same. Everything is the same. Look around, look at the tribalism. There are some Yorubas, Igbos, Hausas, Kanuri, Nupe, whatever the tribe, that if you put a gun in their hands, they'll shoot another tribe's man. So I don't think much has changed. It was the same level of cruelty.
That's very interesting. So, Jennifer, if you have something new to add, let us know.
No, not necessarily new. I think there was a point when it seemed that the conversation was about to devolve into ranking who was worse and who suffered more and who was the more evil person. And that's when I finally raised up my hand. The point is, we need to not forget that while looking back at history, there are points when humanity really it was quite disappointing. A group of people were doing things that you would not even believe humans could, think of this in their heart and do it to another person. And if you think the Pan-Atlantic slave trade and the rest of them were so bad, try and read up the Nazis and their treatment of Jews, and you realize humans can really devolve into devils themselves. But I really just want us that whenever we are thinking of this, instead of comparing if it's the same, it is never the same. And instead of thinking, oh, maybe if we were in the same situation, would have done worse or would have done better, let's just recognize that instance. What was done wrong? How did we get to that point? What are the effects on the after effects on this group of people or the victims? And let's focus on that and how to get better. It doesn't mean we see white people now and say, oh, these are the colonizers or slave traders. No. The generations have changed, but whenever we look back at history, at least we should recognize what was wrong and what lessons we can get from that. I do not like when we compare and try to think of scenarios where we could have been worse or better.
All right, I get your points completely. So I quite enjoy how the conversation is sort of tending towards the next question I wanted to ask. Because, I am from Ibadan, and Ibadan also has a slave history. I even read something particularly concerning, where it's read like for the entire population of a particular community, I'm not certain which community it is, they have all been enslaved 3 or 4 times, and even their king was once a slave in Ibadan. So that's like the slaving history of my hometown, I suppose. But yeah, as Light of Jollof said earlier, chattel slavery is quite different. So the next question is this: history. We are talking about history. I asked the question because I wanted us to talk about history again, because mostly our history is oral. yes. And even when it's written on paper, we do not read. But I saw something interesting that said the Nigerian government is reintroducing history back into the curriculum. And I think we've mentioned it before when we're discussing that book from Adebayo or something with the terrible husband and the beautiful wife. Anyway, the question is this, or this is not even a question, just I want us to consider something. The legacy of the slavery that we do not usually acknowledge. For example, America, British, Britain, they do this. Enslaved there are quite aware of their slaving history. They understand the ripple effects. They know how it's affecting them, right? So someone wrote that the most important thing that the slave trade robbed us of is trust. A lot of our mistrust today is historical, half a millennium old. That's the line that was very interesting to me. So because we forget, we as Nigerians now, we forget our history. I don't think I have ever been told orally what the time of Abacha actually looked like, or the time of Murtala Muhammad. And I do think it's because, well, for example, my family or my tribe was not the target of something like the Biafran war, genocide, something like that, right? So I want us to look at what we think with this sentence I wrote about how the slave trade, half a millennium old, what it robbed us of trust, and how, if you think it is true, or if you think it is just, or what you think about it in general. Because let me maybe paint more context to it. I'm sorry, time is so not enough for it. So imagine the context is the British Empire put a stop to slavery across the world because they were the superpower of the time. But interestingly, a few years after stopping the slave trade, because they were already an industrial nation, they came to Africa to colonize Africa, right? And the argument sort of goes thus that because of the distrust that the 300 or 400 years of slavery has caused between all the tribes of the Niger Delta region, or so and so, that it was impossible, more or less, for Nigerians to band up together against the invaders now. So, Uzoma, I think I singled you out earlier. If you are listening, you should please let me know what you think about what I've said. If you think not acknowledging the slaving history of Nigeria, of the regions that is now known as Nigeria, is directly responsible for the deep mistrust Nigerian tribes have for themselves today, and if you think there are more ripple effects. And anyone else, so please raise your hands if you can hear me. If you guys cannot hear me, I'll be so annoyed.
We heard every single thing you said.
All right, thank you. So, can I have hands? Uzoma, please, I'm waiting for you.
Honestly, can you hear me? Okay. I understood your question, but I do not even think there are two things that can affect each other. Can you please go over the question again? Hey.
All right. The quote that is important is, the most important thing that the slave trade robbed us of is trust. A lot of our mistrust today is historical. Half a millennium old. That's like 500 years old. So, do you think it is true? Let's start from there. Do you think that statement is true? Do you think that slave trade that we all barely remember and we rarely talk about, because oral history, right, is what is directly responsible for our mistrust today? Or do you think it's some other recent event? If you do, you can tell us about it.
Okay, you mean tribes not trusting each other? Is it like we Nigerians not trusting the Europeans, or Nigerians not trusting
Nigerians not trusting Nigerians? This was basically.
Okay. Nigerians not trusting Nigerians. So you're just is giving one tribe is not trusting another tribe. That's how I understood what you said. Though. The feeling of mistrust. The first thing that came to my head was Igbo people going to their village to build houses because they still have PTSD of all their property being taken by the Nigerian government during the Biafran War, and their banks were frozen. So, Igbo people now prefer to live as tenants in the city and build houses at home. That's the first thing that came to my mind. Them not trusting each other because of the after effects of that war. So that's all I want to say.
All right. So you are referencing a more recent event that we can say still exists in living history. Cool. All right. Thank you for sharing. I just wanted to hear a new voice. And thank you again. Jennifer, your hand was raised first.
Okay. I'm hoping I understood the question though. For me, I think beyond the slave trade or the slavery and conquering of kingdoms and exiles and the rest that happened within communities, I think a much more bigger reason why there is such distrust amongst Nigerians now is because we are fundamentally different. There was this book I stumbled across when I was in secondary school. Either secondary school or just after secondary school, I stumbled across it was a book of that my father owned, and it was written by this white man. So he was just documenting his journey across Africa, and in his journey across Africa, he spoke, like from the book, you could see details of the Northerners, you could see details of the East, the Southerners, you could see details of different tribes that are currently now in Nigeria, but how they were quite far apart, and it was trade and even colonization that brought them, like that literally lumped them together. My problem is the fact that the British people made Nigeria was more for their gain and a lot less about, because if we were thinking about the people, they would realize how different we were. You would notice from his book, he spoke about how the Northerners really valued monarchy and how they saw their kings and the royal family. They really valued the royal family, which is quite different from. And in the northern tribe, you will notice a lot of herd mentality. I mean herd mentality in the sense that if the king says something, everyone they are more likely to agree. They are very agreeable to follow a head. But if you come down to the Igbo community, at this point, he wasn't even calling them Igbos. He just, from what he would describe, you know that, he's talking about Igbos at this point. When he came down to the Igbos, he would talk about how each person had that zeal to become their own master. So even though we had monarchs, we also had, there was this need to create chiefs and other hierarchies. So everyone would have some title. If you were a very successful trader, then you should have a title. If you were a very successful hunter, then you should have a title, because the Igbo man always wanted something for himself. And you would see it's very different from the Hausas. And then for the Yoruba land, there was this very strong title. I can't remember exactly what he said about the Yorubas, but my point is we are fundamentally different people. You would not need to travel too far. If you check Ogwashioku, which is where I'm from, and it was mentioned in the book how we're quite beside Benin. We actually we were exiles from Anambra and regions around Anambra, Benin, and the rest of them. But you would still always notice, even though we moved physically, there is always a difference between the Ogwashiokus and the Benin Kingdom. You would always see us being more like the Igbos, which is where we're actually exiled from, and less like the Benins, who are closer even in tradition and location to the Yorubas and the Westerners. So me, I just feel, if you ask me, Nigeria should have never existed. But now that it exists, I guess we'll have to make it work.
Okay, so, all right. That was a bit hard to follow for me, but I think you basically summarized as the differences are very fundamental, and Nigeria is a mistake. So I will. Okay, Barnabas, can you guys please let us try and keep it quick? We are running out of time. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think the mistrust is not necessarily rooted in slave trade, because you mentioned tribal mistrust, because a lot of the slave trade happened within the tribe. Do you understand? Certain tribe, they were certain members of their own tribe. And like, I just want to further add to what Jennifer was saying. I heard somewhere that Lord Lugard may have amalgamated Nigeria geographically, but at heart, Nigerians, we are different. Do you understand? I often hear someone, I think I read somewhere, the guy said, I am first an Igbo man before a Nigerian. So it's ideologies like this that creates the mistrust, because before we were amalgamated, Benin was an independent empire, the Northern Kingdom, etc., etc. So these ideologies were already ingrained in their head that although they brought us together, we are still. That's why even till now, some tribes still want to break out. I don't want to dabble, but you know where I'm heading. Some tribes still feel like they are their own people. So I believe, this is my thought, that's the reason for the mistrust, because we still believe that we are different. Do you understand that? Even though we've been amalgamated, geographically speaking, we are still different people. Like the analogy I drew, where someone would say, I'm first an Igbo man before a Nigerian. Before the white man came to amalgamate this country, I was Igbo. Do you understand? And I will always be Igbo. So that's him saying that this is who he is. And because of that, it's quite difficult relating with people or trusting people from other tribes, because you're not part of it. He feels like very soon we'll soon leave self, because we're not part of you guys initially. So that's what I believe is the reason for the mistrust, not necessarily the slave trade. Thank you.
All right. What I find interesting about both answers is I do not think we are looking critically at what, let's say, 300 years of slaving between tribes looks like. You say it's we say we are fundamentally different, right? But where does that belief come from? Has it always been so? Or do you think if for 7 or 8 generations, your people have been told you never trust, let me, for example, tribe A has enslaved, is a slave-raiding tribe, or they are conquerors. They take people, they sell slaves, because slaves are money. They make money off slaves, buy weapons and sugar and whatever. So, do you not think having those warnings generation after generation after generation is going to calcify into something like we are fundamentally different? So that's the next speaker to take into consideration. So the next speaker is Promise.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here. I would want to agree with Abdul Malik in this case that the lack of trust is not just slavery, but a compoundment of history going back, because I believe that slavery contributed to it, but it's not the ultimate source of mistrust. Like there has to be effects of the wars that occurred over the years within different tribes and kingdoms. So there was the Fulani Jihad, there are the Arochukwu people that were known slavers, there's the Dahomeyans that were that's southern Benin, I believe, and all of these different places, they did injustice to the people around them, and this is just like if to count but a few. And so I think that historically there's been a lot of rife between communities, which now also makes me agree with Jennifer. Like I'm trying to put it together to say that we're different people, yes, and because we're different people, there would be a lot of wars and a lot of strife between communities. So Nigeria is only bounded by the map, the geographical map of it. But if you look at the history, there's been a lot of betrayals, there's been a lot of backstabbing, there's been a lot of slavery, there's been a lot of things that have happened over time that make us remember that these people are not part of our people even though we're in the same Nigeria. And we have to consider all of these different factors that make mistrust happen within communities or within people in Nigeria. So yeah, that's what I would say.
All right, thank you. And right, okay, the next person. Let me keep it moving. Oh, Lambent. Hi.
Thank you, and thank you for being so gracious and keeping the final last days at Focado's conversation going. Unlike Navas, I'll just say, guys, it's 10. Hold all your words in your mouth. So I totally agree with Navas, with Jennifer. I agree with everyone. Like, it's just like this Scottish explorer Mungo Park who comes and says, poof, I've discovered you. Now you exist. Your name is River Niger. The locals have had that river for ages. They have a name for it. They've used it. You just come. You don't say, what did you guys call this river? You just discovered its course, and then you say you have discovered it. It was always there before they gave birth to his father and his father's father. Or maybe I'm with my family. Then someone just shows up and says, the Ezugu family, this Ezugu family, I now join you to the Sinclairs. Sorry, Stranger Things is still French in my mind. I couldn't think of any other surname. So the both of you are now one family. I'll always be loyal to my family, even though you say these people are one family. So I don't get if the white man cannot comprehend that people had a life before them, or there was a world before them. I just feel like this British contraption was not originally, it didn't originally have the potential to work, but just like how Jennifer said, now that it has happened, we must all now imbibe a consciousness of nationhood and statehood and for the common good. That means we must all be the bigger person. But from the beginning, the way they joined it was not very pleasant. But here we are. Thank you once again for allowing us to all talk.
All right, thank you. I would like to conclude with, let me say, a little good news, right? The bronzes that were stolen, there have been concerted efforts to retrieve them, stemming all the way back from the Oba of Benin, I think, maybe the next one after Ogomrawen, I don't know. But so, news is the London's Horniman Museum has decided to return 72 pieces in 2026, and they will have a lasting home in Benin City's new Edo Museum of West African Arts. And in July 2022, Germany transferred ownership of 1,100 artifacts to Nigeria, physically returning to a plaque and an Oba's head as a gesture of good faith. Right. So, in conclusion, director of the Great North Museum, Hancock in Newcastle, pledged to return a single bronze sculpture it's the only one in their collection. And they said, repatriation can be a powerful cultural spirit. It can be a powerful cultural, spiritual, and symbolic act, which recognizes the wrongs of the past and restores some sense of justice. I would also, why I'm mentioning this is, I do believe it's a little, I used to think, what's the fuss about, right? But I suppose I see this something like a wrong can somehow be tried to make right. So I do appreciate the fact that the world or the museum are getting cautious enough to consider returning this to Nigeria. And I'm sorry, I wish we had more time. I have so much more to discuss because anyway, I'll miss you guys. Maybe we'll talk on the chat or something. Thank you all for listening, for contributing. I will be going now. Bye.
Don't forget to hit the follow button and tap on the notification icon to stay updated. That's all for today's episode. To join our book club or stay updated on future discussions, follow us on Instagram and X at Jollof Book Club, Jollof with a double F. And thank you so much for listening.